Hey everyone, my name is Neil Matz. I oversee the Cyber Threat Assessment Program, also called CTAP at Fortinet. And today we're going to talk a little bit about assessment-based selling. So what it is, how Fortinet has embraced this way of selling, go over our very own CTAP program, and I'll show you how you can onboard and generally take advantage of the selling methodology. So since establishing this program, with our partners, we've collectively helped thousands of customers improve their network security and efficiency. So not only can you view assessments as a way to win more business, but it's also rewarding to immediately kind of help your customers identify problem areas and help to rectify them. So really, it's a win-win situation for everybody at the end. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the primary presentation. So when you look across the spectrum of sales acronyms and techniques, there are a lot of commonalities that emerge. Some aspects of selling are almost universal, like uncovering problem areas and then finding a way to add value. And I think that's why assessments are so popular. They kind of address the widest range of sales techniques in a very standardized way. So assessment-based selling gives you a lot of sales versatility, and it leads to more informed and contextual discussions. So in a nutshell, it saves both you and the prospect time in kind of getting to what's important. So no matter what the scenario is you're walking into, assessment-based selling is almost always applicable. So if you look kind of left to right here, assessments help with greenfield opportunities to validate those, that technology right away. It helps with a refresh cycle to demonstrate new features and services. It helps during bake-offs when you're in competitive bake-offs to help change the course of some of those conversations. And it helps, with proof of concepts as well in establishing that rapport and generally creating some account stickiness, even if you have to run a full POC afterwards. So Fortinet uses assessments pretty heavily, but other security vendors have their own similar programs, and there's a reason, right? So industry-wide, it quantifiably works well, and assessments are a proven kind of sales methodology. So what is CTAP exactly? Again, CTAP stands for our Cyber Threat Assessment Program. It's Fortinet's implementation of the assessment-based selling methodology. So normally, to run an assessment, we deploy a Fortinet product, whatever that is, behind an incumbent security solution, and then we monitor traffic for a few days. And after that, we generate a report with findings that are going to highlight some of the shortcomings of their current vendor. So basically, we give them a reason to move to Fortinet in a way that's very contextual and establishes the seller or yourself as a trusted peer. So there are a lot of reasons why CTAP is advantageous to sellers in general. Number one, it accelerates your sales cycle because it highlights security gaps. Number two, by using the CTAP portal, it's going to have a very familiar workflow that's streamlined and kind of standardized way to approach sales. And then finally, it's also going to improve your conversion rates. So if you run an assessment properly, you can expect about an 80% conversion rate to sale, depending on the assessment type. So let's talk a little bit about what's inside these reports. The findings reports that CTAP generates doesn't just create a set of statistics. At the end of the day, your customer is not going to necessarily. I mean, it'll be interesting, but I think what we're really trying to get at here is we're designing the report kind of from the ground up to lead to more of those sales conversations. And so this is valuable not only from a selling perspective, it also helps the prospect kind of reevaluate what's important to them. What should they be taking into account, and what should they be prioritizing? So sellers, normally develop some kind of battle plan before going back to the prospect with their findings. What did you find that was surprising? What does that say about the customer's network? Is that going to lead to bigger problems down the line? So throughout the course of one or multiple assessments, these IT managers and security admins are going to start to view you as trusted peers and value contributors to their overarching security strategy. And at the end of the day, that's kind of where we want to get to, right? So basically, customers listen to us because we know more about their network than they do in some cases. So each assessment type that we offer and I'll get to what those are in a moment. We follow a similar flow. So we keep each report to about 12 pages, so it's fairly succinct and easy to consume, not just from a technical staff perspective, but also for any of the C-level decision makers. So the cover page, will allow partners like yourself to add your company logo and branding to the assessment, and we try to keep the language within the report as neutral as possible. That way you can easily incorporate our reports into your selling assessment practice. In the executive summary on the upper right here, that provides an infographic-y type of view into the findings. Again, that's meant to pique the interest of executives and kind of list those key findings. And it also sets the stage for more detailed breakdowns of the 3 key sections of the report, and those might vary based on the assessment type. So for each of the 3 sections, we usually include 6 to 8 detailed visualizations to kind of drive home a very specific point. So if you look here, we have 3 buckets, if you will, or 3 categories. We have security, productivity, and utilization. And so we kind of expand on each of those concepts within the body of the report with some additional visualizations. So again, we're trying to create kind of a colorful and visually appealing way to represent any issues and kind of illustrate next actions. And then finally, the last section is a dynamically generated list of actionable recommendations. So the recommendations shown here, again, are only going to be rendered if it's relevant to this assessment. So keep in mind that that's very useful for customers, for obvious reasons, but it's also helpful to you, right? So before you go in and present those findings, it'll kind of help you, make a list of things that you probably need to review with them as something actionable. So I should note that Fortinet currently has 3 assessment types available. We have an NGFW or gateway firewall assessment. We have an SD-WAN assessment, which is really kind of a network optimization report. And then we also have an email assessment. So as you can see, we're trying to cover lots of different areas and elements of the security fabric. There's a strategic reason for that, and I'll talk about why having a variety of assessment reports can help you in the next slide. But in terms of prospecting with each of these assessment types, there's really nothing better than just passing out these sample reports to your customers, and I can almost guarantee you that they're going to want one, and not just because it it looks pretty, but because of the valuable contextual information that is contained within them. I'm going to take a moment and talk about some of these reports in a little bit more in depth. So NGFW assessments. So we're using FortiGate to run those assessments. They can be run in either sniffer mode or in transparent mode or inline. Same thing with the secure SD-WAN assessment. That's kind of the same deployment type. And then we have our email risk assessment, which can be run, and typically what happens there is that's all cloud-based. So when you create an assessment, we provision a Fortinet Cloud instance. You're effectively BCCing all of the customer's traffic to that Fortinet Cloud instance. We do some analytics on that and generate the report from there. So all of these assessment types, I should note, can be run from the cloud or virtually. So with we're kind of the tail end of the pandemic here, but if you do need to run those remotely and you can't get physical access into those data centers or meet face to face, then we do have options for that. So just keep in mind that each of those assessment types are mapped to a key decision maker, right? So NGFW assessments are great for CISOs and security architects. Email assessments are great for the infrastructure team, and SD-WAN assessments are great for the networking team, right? So if you're struggling to get your foot in the door to a specific account, let's say, as for instance, maybe a CISO loves another vendor and they're acting as an account blocker, try to use a different assessment type and work with a different team. But there's more than one way to get into an account. Use these assessments as a way to bypass those account gatekeepers. So I want to talk about some of the testimonials from actual sellers who are running assessments. And the first quote is a great example of how CTAP can demonstrate immediate value. So unlike trying to convince a prospect via conversations, those countless back and forth emails and data sheets, you can bypass some of those discussions and just show a prospect Fortinet's value as it relates directly to their network. So that's one of the key value propositions here. Is we call that proof of value. So the second quote, is where the opportunity went from 20K to a 200K deal. It's a great example of cross-selling. So that is, once you get the confidence of the prospect, you can move laterally into the account and begin to cross-sell other elements of the security fabric. And this last quote, it's a good example of how CTAPs can accelerate a sale. I remember this one pretty well. It was an assessment that found some malware, a botnet, and a ton of unsanctioned activity. And in this particular case, I know it was run effectively over a lunchtime, and by the end of the day, it had quickly escalated, from those influencers to the budget approvers, and it was converted into a sale within a couple hours after having presented those CTAP findings. So pretty compelling stuff. But I wanted to talk a little bit too about some of our, these success stories. These are all fairly recent. This one is kind of an example of how we can land some of that greenfield business. And we ran an assessment in a U.S. school district based out of Illinois. So their networking team was previously invested in another vendor solution. But after running an assessment, the sellers learned a lot about the customer's network, and they found 13 malware hits that had been missed by their incumbent vendor. And as you can expect, that's the kind of thing that gets stakeholders talking. So when the sellers found 91% of their traffic was encrypted, that also led to an SSL decryption discussion and a performance discussion. So again, that's something that's very much in Fortinet's wheelhouse. So with the school district's newfound confidence in Fortinet, the account team expanded the discussion to other fabric products, and ultimately what started off honestly as kind of a fishing expedition with an uphill battle against the incumbents turned into a multi-product Fortinet investment totaling nearly $250,000. So great win there. Here's another great example. It was a municipality in Kansas, outside of a metro area. So this is another great example of landing and expanding with CTAP. So a new CIO had asked for a comprehensive evaluation of all of their security controls. An NGFW assessment was suggested as part of that prescribed action. So after having run that initial assessment, we found 5 previously unknown malware, and then a conversation ensued, right? And that's really what CTAP is about. It's trying to lead to those additional conversations. So that led to more and more fabric discussion, and some other products kind of entered the fray there. So ultimately, this was a nearly $1.5 million deal, which again just kind of started off as a proof of value discussion. So it's not just customers we're affecting here. I want to kind of outline how this could affect you as a partner. So when I say the impact of CTAP is quantifiable, let's take a look at this this expert partner. So in this case, there was also a top-down commitment from the partner to kind of build an assessment practice. And the partner and Fortinet, this is a couple years ago, they originally hosted 1-hour lunch trainings for 19 weeks. And the trainings instructed sellers on how to target prospects, how to create assessments, how to leverage the collateral they were given. So, and that was in October of 2018. And then the partner ran their first assessment, I believe, at the end of that month. In the next year, in 2019, this partner generated $7.2 million in business. And then last year, they did great too. They delivered 470 assessments in a very, very rough selling climate. So if you're interested in having similar discussions on how we can either augment your existing security practice or help you build a security practice, just reach out to your account manager and schedule a time to review your assessment practice. So even if you have something in place, we can likely help augment it in a way that's going to produce results. So how do you get cranking with CTAP? Well, this is basically a blueprint on how to kick off your assessment practice, and pay special attention here if you're an authorized or advocate partner. So to get up to speed, first you're going to want to log into the CTAP portal. The address is ctap.fortinet.com. You can use your partner portal login. Poke around and specifically within the help section. So there are a lot of materials there for each assessment type. You'll see when you go to the help section there are various tabs, and each tab is for that separate assessment type. Those will include training videos, presentations, various collateral, and this is the key. Set up an assessment in a lab environment to see how that end-to-end process works. So if you're familiarized with the process before you actually go into that customer environment, you're going to be a lot more comfortable about running into any potential unknowns. After you feel significantly, or sufficiently knowledgeable, rather, you can start promoting assessments. So download and liberally distribute those sample reports to your prospects. I mentioned that before. I think that's really important. Use the supplementary call to action slides that we have available within your own sales decks. That's a much better approach than, hey, I'll email you next week and kind of get your thoughts. And then, this is all going to culminate in you running your first assessment. And really, that's the beginnings of setting up your own assessment practice. And all this can be done in less than a week with some focus. So I'm not going to go into kind of the intricacies of how to create assessments. I'll leave the online training videos for that. But I'd like to talk to you at a very high level about how the typical CTAP lifecycle works. So the first step to running an assessment is creating that assessment. Go to the CTAP portal, and effectively you're going to be filling out a form there. So you'll log in, choose the assessment type, and then fill in the details and hit submit. Secondly, you're going to want to position the Fortinet product or the service. So once you procure that, you're going to want to set that up. And so again, after you kind of set up that, after you go through that assessment form and set that up, you'll be given a set of instructions on how to deploy a device for logging. And then after that, you're going to be collecting logs. This is a very passive step, so you can just sit back and monitor activity for about a week. Email assessments sometimes run longer, but a typical assessment is run for 3 to 7 days on average. When you're done collecting logs, go back to the CTAP portal and click on the Logs Ready button for that assessment, and the portal is going to automatically generate an assessment report for you based on the logs that you've collected. And then finally, prepare and discuss the findings with your prospect. So be sure to study the results before you present to your customers' executives, right? So ideally, you can move from that evaluation kind of stage to a purchase decision. If that prospect still needs to run some interoperability testing or an extended POC, that's fine. But you've created some account stickiness prior to having done that. And again, you're kind of in the driver's seat to close the deal at that point. So I want to talk a little bit about how we procure hardware, and this is really specific to the firewall FortiGate-based assessments, so NGFW or SD-WAN assessments. You're going to need some hardware in most cases. We do offer VMs. A lot of our partners prefer to use hardware. What we usually suggest is to purchase an NFR or not for resale FortiGate. I think a lot of our partners kind of start off with a 61F typically. And so once you do that, you'll acquire that NFR device. You can use that in cookie cutter kind of serial fashion. So you can take that from one prospect to the next and continue to run those. If you don't want to do that and you're based in the US, there is an option when you go through and create the assessment that you can actually have a loaner box shipped out to you. We call it eval devices or loaner pool devices. So we have some that we can offer. So just make sure that you check that checkbox, and it's going to ask you where you want to send it. We can either send it to you, the partner, or we can drop ship it directly to the customer. The great thing about that is we'll include a kind of a return label with that. And then you can, when you're done with the assessment, you can kind of repackage up the device, slap that label on, and it'll be sent back to our Plano office. All right. So we do have some restrictions on the FortiGates that we allow to run CTAP assessments. I want to talk about that just briefly. Most assessments can be run with either 60E, 60F, or 61F. Obviously, the F series are more popular nowadays. But yeah, just keep in mind that, you know, if you're doing kind of a starter kit, your first few assessments, most of your customers will be fine running a 61F in probably sniffer mode. That said, you know, we did validate some additional models, and you can scale up depending on what the requirements are for your particular environment. If you're going to run inline assessments, meaning that you're gonna, you know, stick the FortiGate within the flow of traffic, that could be more disruptive, right, rather than sniffer mode. And so you're going to want to ensure that that FortiGate is oversized and it can handle all the, you know, the traffic load. So we did add some support for additional models last year. So we added support for the 1100E or 1101E, and then we also added the 400E. So if you're looking for 10 gig interfaces and that sort of thing, then you'll want to go with some of those models. But also note, you can run any FortiGate-based assessment remotely. I mentioned that before. You know, as long as the customer has ESXi, VMware ESXi 6.5 and above in their network environments, you can run a virtual assessment. The process for that is very simple. So after you create the assessment, you're going to get a set of binaries that then you can basically send to the end customer. You'll get a set of instructions to help them walk through that and set it up. But suffice to say, it'll deploy the binaries. There's a configuration file that's automatically deployed, and the licensing is all set up and ready to go as well. All right, so you know, a lot of these materials, you know, I mentioned the CTAP portal before. It's ctap.fortinet.com. We also have partners.fortinet.com that you can check out. Now, a lot of those materials that we have, including the sample reports, the training decks, the prospecting flyers, are available on either of those portals. So we replicate those materials, you know, between the CTAP portal under the help section, and then on the partner portal under the CTAP section. And then you can use your partner portal credentials to log into both. So one quick thing on the partner portal, it's on the homepage. You should be able to see the CTAP link there. But if you don't, just go to sales and marketing, and then there's cyber threat assessment program. You can click on that. So in terms of some of the things you're going to find there, you know, there is a bunch of turnkey collateral that we have available. So, you know, the CTAP program has an extensive collection of materials that you can reuse. So while, you know, the sample reports are kind of the most useful item you're going to prospect with, we also have email templates, we have flyers, we have a pre-visit worksheet, which is typically used to kind of get some information prior to running the assessment, and then you just enter that info into the form. We have solution briefs, we have PowerPoint slides that you can use as a call to action within your own presentation. So, so yeah, feel free to leverage that. That's what it's there for. Some of the materials can be instantly co-branded also, and that's all done via the partner portal. So once you go to the portal, go to sales resources, click on CTAP assets, and some of the materials are going to be denoted as co-brandable. So when you click on the co-brand button, you're going to upload your company logo, and then you can download that newly branded material right away. So it's very simple, very easy, and again, this is what makes the whole this whole assessment practice thing kind of turnkey. As you explore the CTAP program, don't forget that you have, you know, Fortinet resources at your fingertips to help out. So your account team can help you procure the right, not for resale hardware that you're going to need to get started. If you opt not to use virtualized assessments, the Fortinet partner team can help you with any access issues. So just email partners@fortinet.com if you can't reach the partner portal or you can't log into the CTAP portal. And then finally, lean on the CTAP alias. So our CTAP alias is ctap@fortinet.com. You know, we're here to help you kind of be your default alias, I guess, for troubleshooting, basic questions, and for getting SE assistance. So from a technical perspective, the CTAP alias can help you with training, configuration problems, best practices, all the way up to and including interpreting the final report. So there are a few conversations that could lead to a CTAP assessment, and I wanted to focus on a few of those here. The first question, how do you assess the effectiveness of your existing solution? Well, that implies that security operations, should have already established some kind of process by which they proactively assess their security effectiveness, and quite often that leads them to ask for some assistance in setting up an effectiveness practice or a rigor that they haven't already. So asking a customer if they have visibility to make informed decisions. So things like, do you know how many cloud-based workloads you have? Is peer-to-peer being used within your organization? That sort of thing. That helps if they're using some older equipment that is due for a refresh. So the same applies to the, do you feel like you have control question in the middle that you see here. Many times, those older solutions, they just don't have that next generation visibility, or it's very clunky, or the signatures are out of date, or there's no licensing there. So having a new level of visibility is going to allow that prospect to apply more advanced policies. And normally IT managers want to see what's available with the current technology. And then the last question around capacity planning, that'll help, kind of set the table for, increased bandwidth discussions, inspecting SSL-based traffic. So performance is something that Fortinet just kind of excels at, and you're implying that their existing infrastructure may not be able to keep up with more modern demands. So we try to have a dedicated utilization and performance section within all of our reports, and again, that just highlights some of the processing capabilities, because Fortinet always seems to come out on top there. So initially, some potential customers might object to running a CTAP in their environment, but it's important that they're aware of the benefits of running an assessment, right? So 3 common objections that we normally get are listed here with some of the suggested responses. So I already have a solution for that and we're happy with it. Well, that may be, but I think in a lot of cases, the customer is kind of unaware of its actual kind of real world effectiveness. So emphasize that security effectiveness angle is really important, and remind them that an assessment might produce unexpected findings. And again, I kind of liken it to getting a doctor's second opinion. Some potential customers might balk because they don't have a near-term budget available. Actually, assessments are really great for that. So I wouldn't consider that a con at all. That's actually a pro. So stress that running an assessment is actually going to help them in attaining some additional budget during their next planning cycle, especially if anything of significance is found. Lastly, we get this all the time that, they're just too busy to evaluate new products or look at other technologies. In reality, very little of their time is necessary here. Just reemphasize that that's what you're there for, is to kind of help them navigate that so they don't have to invest lots of time into it. And you should emphasize that, this could really mean the difference between detecting a breach now or, letting something ride and potentially causing significant headaches down the road. So in terms of some sales tips here, these always kind of come up. Again, give out those sample reports like candy. I think your prospects are really going to want that once they see what's in the reports. Position this as a risk-free service, and that you're offloading burden. We mentioned that on the last slide, but it kind of goes without saying. They don't. Typically these IT managers or security admins, they just don't have the time to be looking at things like security effectiveness when the reality is they're just trying to keep things up and running day to day and tactically. So offer those alternative assessment types if there's some entrenched vendor or you're seeing account blockers within a specific account. Here's some keywords. If you hear the term M365 or G Suite, Office 365, you should pitch email assessments. So again, all of our email assessments are kind of hosted in the cloud. They're actually very simple to run, and no on-prem equipment is required at all for those. If you hear Cisco refresh, definitely pitch SD-WAN assessments. You can just look at the latest Gartner MQ and kind of see where Fortinet plays out there, and we've basically been not only gaining ground, but we're a leader in the SD-WAN space. So take advantage of the overlay resources where possible. I mentioned that a few slides back. Don't be a stranger. It's totally fine to reach out if you don't know the answer to a question, and more than likely, if it's something technical, we can have a sales engineer get on the phone with you and kind of talk through whatever challenges you're running into. All right, so let's recap. Our keys to success with the CTAP program. So use the CTAP program to help you convert more deals. And remember, if you already have an assessment practice, you don't have to run all the assessment types that we offer. So pick and choose the one that make the most sense for your business. Before you perform your first customer assessment, make sure you familiarize yourself with running an assessment in a lab environment. That's key. You don't want to be kind of fumbling around once you're at the customer site. Leverage the turnkey marketing materials to kind of quickly go to market. I can't stress this enough, especially for some of our authorized partners and things like that. It's very, very helpful in trying to set that up, especially if you don't consider assessments kind of a core capability. Partner admins, I didn't really mention this, but I'll mention it here. Partner admins are typically the ones who go in and create a partner account with Fortinet. And so those partner admins will typically have visibility across their entire organization. And what that means is they can see all the assessment activity that's being run on behalf of your partner organization. So look into that, track metrics on an ongoing basis there, and build those metrics into some of your KPIs and your business reviews. So again, you're not alone in this. Kind of lastly, number 5 here, we're eager to help you out, get you up to speed with running assessments. Keep in mind you have an account manager, you have a partner team, and a CTAP team, all kind of willing to help out. So as a reminder, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact the CTAP team at ctap.fortinet.com. So with that, thanks for your time today, and we can't wait to help you start adopting an assessment-based selling strategy with yourselves and with Fortinet. So thank you.